Okay, we're gonna go ahead and make our brain dump together. So the first thing I'm gonna do is write my inequalities. I have less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Less than is an open circle, less than or equal to closed, open, and closed. If I'm graphing inequalities, this is a dotted line, dotted, and solid. Above my inequalities, I'm just going to make some notes. This is less than or equal to, greater than, and greater than or equal to. Then I'm going to make my notes for domain and range. So if I'm finding my domain, I know that's my x values, and we move left to right. Now, if I have numbers on, or boundaries, circles, if I'm finding domain and range on both sides, I know my x is going to be surrounded by inequalities, and then I'm going to have my numbers here. So maybe you want to draw that visual just to help you remember. So same thing with my range. My y is scrunched in the middle. It's surrounded by my two inequalities, and then my values go here. And your inequalities are always going to be facing the same way. You just need to look at your circles to determine whether they're going to have the or equal to sign underneath. And so for range, we move bottom to top. Next thing I want to make sure I note is whether I have discrete or continuous situations. So discrete are things you can count. So that would just be listed by numbers. It's also represented just by dots on a graph. So if you see just points on a graph and they ask you for the domain or the range, just remember those are just the points. And continuous are things that's measured, and that's always represented by an inequality. So maybe you just want to write a little inequality symbol to help you remember. If it's a continuous function, then it's something that will be written as an inequality. Over here, I'm going to just draw a coordinate grid so I can list some key features. So you know this is my y, also my range. This is my x, also my domain. And then I'm going to go ahead and just draw a linear function here. And I'm going to label this my y-intercept. And remember, your y-intercept is always written as a 0, and then whatever number it's crossing on the y-axis. And then here's my x-intercept, where it passes the x-axis. I also call that the 0. And that will always be written as whatever number it's passing through and 0. So make sure you really know how those are written. One way to help you remember, we know that in an ordered pair, this is x and this is y. So if I'm looking at my x-intercept, there's going to be the value for x when y is 0. And just the opposite, if it's the y-intercept, I know that x will be 0, and my value for y is going to have a number. Oops. Okay, so that's just a real quick way to help you remember what value goes where. Okay, next I'm going to make my ones chart. Now our ones chart helps us set up anything with direct variation. So if you see anything that says directly or direct variation or directly proportional. Sorry, this looks really sloppy. And you probably want to do some abbreviations if you don't want to remember those words. But just remember the W stands for words. The O stands for whatever original information they're telling you. And then the N stands for new. Now, if they don't tell you any new information and they just want the equation for direct variation, that's going to be y equals kx, where k is your constant. So that's going to be whatever values are in your original just divided by each other, which you'll know that because you won't fill out anything for your new. And then your equation, whatever's on top is your y and whatever's on the bottom is your x. So it's really important you just make sure you're writing and filling in your ones chart correctly. So that way you know what goes here if you're just writing the equation and then what goes here. Okay, next I'm going to make my notes for solving for a variable. So if they ever say like, what is the value of y, what's the value of x, whatever the case. If you don't remember the word variable or you feel stuck on that, just know that variable is the same thing as a letter, right? So if you want to just write solving for a letter, you write this how you want to write it. So remember in Desmos, we have our little trick where we can just change the variable. You can't have x or y, so just change it to whatever. And we change our equal sign to the tilde sign. And that will give you our value for whatever variable they're asking you to find. Okay, next I'm gonna make my notes for Hoy and Bucks. So Hoy is our horizontal line. It has a 0 slope. So if you have a question and it's saying, what is the equation of a line that has a 0 slope? You need to be thinking of Hoy. And the equation is always going to be y equals, and then whatever the y value is. And the reason for that is because it's a horizontal line, which means it's just going to cut through that y-axis. And then Vux is our vertical line with an undefined slope. So that's your keyword. If you ever see something that's talking about an undefined slope, you were thinking of a vertical line, and that equation is always going to be x equals whatever the x value is. Okay, let's keep on moving. So next up, let's make our notes for parallel and perpendicular slope. So parallel, they have the same slope. And kind of a trick here, just parallel has two L's, which are the same and they're never going to touch. So that's kind of a clue. Just remember parallel lines have the same slope and they never touch, where perpendicular, which mathematically the perpendicular symbol looks like this. And our rule for that is flip and switch. I also recommend you write a number 1 for flip and 2 for switch. So that way you remember you're always doing 2 steps if you're finding an equation for a perpendicular line. So whether it's perpendicular or parallel, we have those 4 steps. We have, and this is only if it's in slope-intercept form. So we have our OG, our original equation. Our second step is to put in whatever point they're telling us it passes through. Our third step is y1 tilde mx1, plus b. Oh, let me just erase that. mx1 plus b. And then our fourth step is to put in whatever slope. So our parallel slope or the perpendicular slope. Now, if it's in standard form, parallel is going to have the same left side, where perpendicular, we flip and switch the A and B values. So just kind of make note on that. If you want to add that to your brain dump, I guess I can go ahead and add that. So this will be, I'm just going to write it here. This is for slope-intercept form, and then standard will be same left side. And for perpendicular, we flip the A and B, and we switch the sign. And then you just plug in whatever points they're giving you. Okay, next we are going to do standard to slope and slope to standard. So I'm going to make some notes here. So standard to slope intercept. So standard form, we have ax plus by equals c. Now you don't have to have that memorized because it's on your star reference sheet. But just remember, with standard form, our real quick trick is negative a over b is our slope, and c, oh my gosh, sorry, and c over b is our y-intercept. So this negative a over b, just remember that is the same thing as saying our exciting move and our great divide, right? So this is what's moving, and this is what we're dividing by. Just again, I would make sure that you box your b values so you're paying attention to whether you're dividing by a negative or a positive number. And then if we're going from slope to standard, we can't have fractions. We have to clear the fractions. And we do that by multiplying everything by the denominator. Now you're not always going to have a fraction, but if you do, that's how you would clear it. And then we move our slope, right? We move the number next to x, so it moves with y. And then we have to make sure we don't have any negatives, so no negative x value. And if we do, we multiply everything by -1 to make it positive. Okay, we are almost done. All right, if I'm writing in standard form, that's where we're gonna have our situation, variable 1, variable 2, and then our total. So remember, key word for writing in standard form is that they're always gonna be giving you some sort of total. And you're gonna be comparing two variables. Make sure you label what your variables are in these boxes, so that way when you are solving that, you're making sure you're first of all, writing it in the right spot and then solving it correctly. So if you need to solve for your two systems of equations, you need to make sure you change it into slope-intercept form. And again, our real quick way to do that is we can use our little cheat code here, and that will be the fastest way to get it into slope-intercept form, so then you can graph it. And when you graph it, your system of equations, you are looking for that point of intersection, that point where they meet. That will be your solution. You'll have obviously an x value and a y value. Again, that's why it's important to pay attention to your variables, because that's going to tell you what variable each of these stand for if you're looking for your answer. Okay, and last step for graphing inequalities. So we kind of did this above, but we will do it again. So we're always going to pay attention to that inequality sign. So it's going to be dotted if it's less than or greater than, and it's going to be a solid line if it's less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. If we are graphing, we want to make sure it's in slope-intercept form. And then we use our test point of 0, 0, which is our origin, and that is going to tell us whether we are graphing towards the origin or away from the origin. You can also, for solving our inequalities, remember another really quick way for these is to find your y-intercept and your x-intercept. That can oftentimes be a really quick way, because we don't really care about a simplified answer for these. We just want Desmos to graph it. So this method is usually really, really quick when you are graphing inequalities. Okay, so those are like the really big notes to have on your brain dump. It seems like a lot, but just practice making it, and again, write it however you need to write it, so you're getting the best notes you can and getting everything you need before your test.